And like a big question I get is what's different about Gen Z and how should I lead differently, if at all? So common dilemmas are things like giving critical feedback about people's work, classroom observations. So going back of people's classes and seeing how they're doing and giving them feedback on that. Um, Another puzzle is critiquing professionalism. So a young teacher maybe has to change something about their appearance, their clothes, anything about just being in the workplace after straight out of college. Related is their social media presence. So do they still look like a 16-year-old in their behavior on social media, and now they're supposed to be a role model on campus? So how do you have that conversation in a way that doesn't push someone away and make them offended, but instead gets them on board? We all know there's a stress and anxiety issue facing the next generation. Those young people are now in our classrooms. They're the COVID generation. Students who started college in COVID are now often our first year teachers. And so, how are they dealing with the stress and anxiety of that, and how do we support them, if at all? Um, just going quickly through this, other things were coming up, conversations with parents. Um, so, for example, someone's at back to school night and they make some promises that may or may not be followed through during the year. Or you can tell they're sticking their foot in their mouth, what they're saying to parents. How do you criticize those instructors without coming across as too controlling? Um, Teachers who have their first major assignment. So one thing that happens a lot is teachers will assign some challenging task like writing an essay or doing a presentation, and they'll under explain it. And so students will, if you look at the rubric, they're earning a C or 70%, but those teachers don't want to give a 70 to the whole class. So they have a dilemma. Am I what I call a protector, where I try to protect people's like my students' ego by giving them a high grade even if they didn't earn it, or am I an enforcer? Am I kind of rigorously adhering to my grading criteria even if it was almost impossible for students to meet that standard? At any rate, either way a teacher goes could have big impact, could be frustration for them, for the school, etc. Um, the other dilemmas around near peer mentoring between younger and more experienced colleagues. So one thing we're hearing is that a lot of organizational culture, like culture on your campus, is set through those informal conversations between more experienced people and more inexperienced people. But we have no control over those. So who knows what the senior teachers are saying about us as administrators, and if that's good for morale. This is an example of I've started consulting for some professional sports teams and some college sports teams. And I was talking to the head of USA basketball. This is the guy who decides who's on the Olympic team. And I was like, you guys are American basketball players. You're going to go play European basketball. Um, it's going to be hard. You got to adjust your game. So how do you help coach the young players to adapt and adjust in the right way? And he's like, oh, we have, a senior athlete. We've got usually like a guy who's almost retired who's kind of the wise person on the bench. And I'm like, what coaching do you give that person to say the right stuff? We're like, oh, none at all. And I'm like, your plan to win a gold medal is to have like jocks who never talk about feelings somehow be great at like talking about feelings to these other players. And like, yeah, that's our plan. It's not a good plan. So as administrators, we've got this mix of colleagues in our schools and in our districts. How are we helping them to be near peer mentors that are going to be effective? Um, and other challenges as well. Okay, so I don't know if anyone's written in the chat, maybe not. But if any of these stand out to you, I'd love to just give you a moment to either riff on them or affirm. So if you could join by chat, um, any of these that stand out to you, you agree with, how they look different in your campus, go ahead and share now. We'll give you a minute to do that. We've got a couple coming in. Sorry, we didn't warn you that you're going to have to, really participate. But you guys are professional educators. So if I just talk the whole time, you'd be like, this guy's the worst teacher. So trying not to be a hypocrite. Um, yeah, the transfer portal is a big issue. And so we're working on that. I'm consulting for Auburn's baseball team and Notre Dame's soccer team. And so trying to help the coaches negotiate that. Um, okay, great. Um, we're going to revisit these dilemmas both in some research examples and then also kind of as a group. But thank you for doing some thinking. Also, hopefully you can see the relevance of what we're going to discuss to issues that might be facing you. Okay. Now we're trying to be efficient, so I'm going to give you 100 years of social psychology in one slide. All right. And so if there's a disaster in your school, like, a swarm of bees is loose and you have to go deal with that or something, at least you will have seen the main points as a result of this slide. So the main point is that when you're critiquing somebody, when you're trying to influence employees, etc., what you're trying to do is to generate willing and lasting change without ongoing coercion and without excessive surveillance. Okay, why do I say that? Well, obviously, you want people to change. That's why you're talking to them or critiquing them, right? But you don't want to have the kind of change where it's continually on you to maintain that change, where you have to create a whole excessive like surveillance system to watch people, punish them, reward them, etc., because you're creating more work for yourself. It'd be like, in a classroom having a cheating policy that's more complex than even your instruction is, right? It's like way better to just have students who wouldn't want to cheat than it is to have a huge apparatus for catching cheating, right? Um, so in psychology, there is a lot of research on how to generate this kind of change, right? I mean, you can generate coercive change, and that psychology is not complicated. It's just power. Like you can use raw power to force people to do things in a lot of settings. But for a lot of the things we want our educators to do differently, or our staff, you can't use raw power. You have to use soft power. And so, given that, psychologists think of four broad buckets of behavior change approaches. One is mandates. So you can mandate something and then have threats for noncompliance. The obvious limitation of that is that any impact will depend on how convincing your mandate is, how legitimate your authority is as like a leader, um, how fearful people are from having the threats like come true, right? How strong the incentives are, etc. So there are real limitations for mandates. When we can mandate things, it's great because you can just say, "Hey, do this thing, you have to," and then they do it. But for a lot of things, that's not the best way to go. Financial incentives is another way in general to change behavior. The obvious limitation is it's not free. And you have to invent an incentive scheme that can't be gamed. So it creates a lot of work for people. But again, many people's minds first jump to, I'm going to just bribe people into doing the right thing. Nudging, you may be familiar with this idea. The way we think about it is nudges are ways of taking something something that somebody already wants to do and reminding them to do it or making it easier for them to do it. Okay. So if you have to appear in court and the form you get is super hard to read and it's not clear what date you're supposed to be there, you're less likely to appear in court than if we make the form super easy to read and we put the date and time up top and maybe we help pay for parking or whatever. Okay. So nudging works for stuff that people already want to do when the issue is that they forgot about it or it was too hard. A lot of the things we're talking about, though, in our classrooms are not that. There definitely are some compliance things, like maybe paperwork. Maybe you need your instructional coaches to file a certain report every other week, and they forget or it's too hard. Nudges can help with that. But for anything that's interpersonal, like how teachers talk to kids, nudging isn't necessarily the best way to go. And the last is persuasion. Try to change someone's mind. Okay. And that, of course, is free. Like, you don't need an incentive. You don't need to monitor people and like obsess over what they're doing, and you don't have to threaten them with punishment, right? Because if someone's truly persuaded, then they choose to do something of their own free will because they think it's the right choice. Okay. So persuasion gets you to this goal of willing, lasting change without ongoing coercion and without excessive surveillance. So it's got that going for it. The problem is, um, conventional ideas about persuasion tend to be wrong. That in general, when lay people, those of us who just normal people, when we try to persuade people, we go about it in the wrong way, and we resort to something that I call grown-splaining, which is that I, with my better expertise and leadership and knowledge and power, et cetera, will just explain to you what you need to know, and then you need to listen to me and adopt it. And in our minds, we think, if only I could explain clearly the content of my smart, powerful brain, then you would be persuaded, right? But anyone who's tried to convince their family members of some political or religious point at Thanksgiving, anyone would know that just explaining your side of it doesn't yield persuasion, right? People have other reasons why they're not persuaded that are different from just the arguments we make. And it's because people tend to peripheral cues, specifically who's communicating with them and how it's being communicated. And those peripheral cues indicate to them things like whether they're being humiliated or disrespected in this moment, or what will happen to them socially in the future. So the punchline of all of this is that, if you have a goal of generating willing, lasting change in your organization without ongoing coercion or surveillance, then there's a certain kind of argument you need to make, which is what we call a values aligned argument, which is an argument that is consistent with someone's underlying motivation, while also attending to the subtle ways that you communicate, specifically whether or not you're coming across as disrespectful or humiliating, or on the other side, whether you're coming across as generating greater social esteem, greater reputation, etc. Okay, so that's 100 years of social psychology in one slide, and that's why in the examples I'll talk through today, I'll give you 3 quick ones. We're going to talk about language and communication, how things are communicated as a way of inducing behavior change. And these are things any leader can start acting on right away after this talk. All right, so 3 examples of paying attention to how you say it. First we have a little model here of why this matters. I apologize. The reason this matters is that you end up with something we call the miscommunication cycle. So take the example of a school. You're giving critical feedback to, let's say, a young instructor, right? And maybe they're a little sensitive about it. At the top, their interpretation is, my school leader is disappointed in me and thinks I'm incompetent. If that's their view of what the feedback was meaning, then they, in the bottom right, become less proactive in changing. They're not going to follow directions independently. They might not come ask for help when they're stuck, right? But because they don't do that, then now they're not doing teaching in the way we want or doing the behavior we want, right? So they haven't complied. And given that, we need to then give them even more critical feedback and keep talking to them about changing or fixing what they're doing, which in turn feeds into this belief that this person's on my case. They're disappointed in me. They think I'm incompetent. That's why they keep talking to me and telling me the same thing again and again. So ironically, the more you keep having to give the feedback, the more worried someone is that you think they're incompetent, which causes them to be less likely to change. And then this cycle happens again and again. And what it can end with is teachers being less effective because they're not doing the right stuff in their classrooms. And then because of that, you have worse student outcomes. And then you get worse attrition and burnout for teachers. And this can happen even with highly trained, highly motivated teachers who care about kids and who want to do a good job. This cycle can still happen because of a miscommunication. And this, I see this all the time in campuses and large studies that we do. Great staff, motivated staff, well-compensated staff still underperforms, in part because of the distrust that can be bred in this miscommunication cycle. So the three examples we have was like how to resolve this and start a better cycle. So the first one is critical feedback in the context of uh, writing. So this is maybe you might have seen the study before. We call it wise feedback study. But in this experiment, we had seventh graders write essays of um, about a big hero of theirs in life. So this kid wrote about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And the teachers cover the essays and comments and give critical feedback, not unlike what we would do if I was a school leader in a school critiquing someone's instruction, right? You point out some good things, maybe you say good job. You also point out things they need to change. You give lots of substantive feedback. And in our minds, we've done our jobs. Maybe we think, oh, I've done the compliment sandwich, right? I've praised you and then criticized you and then praised you again. But the problem is people don't like the compliment sandwich. No one wants to eat it because they know what you're doing. Like if I said, um, thanks for coming on time to the meeting. All the ideas you shared in the meeting were terrible, but thanks for being polite. You'd be like, well, this person doesn't like my contributions. Like you're not worried about the praise for being on time or polite. You're worried about the substantive part. And so students often are concerned about the hidden meaning of the feedback. Like, is the teacher really critiquing me because they're looking down on me and they dislike me? And so what we found is you need to be clear and transparent about your communication. Um, and so the way we tested that is we had teachers handwrite post-it notes where they clarified their intentions. One is what we call wise feedback. So this is a way of clarifying what the teacher is up to. And it's specifically in this study, it says, I'm giving you these comments because I have high standards and I know that you can meet them. And so the two key parts are first, the appeal to the high standard, which basically implies that I'm not being biased against you. And second, the assurance that with the right support, you can meet that standard. So it's not like I'm trying to make you feel bad or I'm trying to keep you out. It's almost saying, I care about you so much that I'm investing in you and your growth. And these comments are a sign of that investment in care and concern. But I also care about you too much to lower my standards and let you underperform. Okay. So that's wise feedback. Students get the note or a control note. And the control note said, I'm giving you these comments so you have feedback on your essay. So it conveys no novel information. Then we put it in sealed envelopes, hand them out to students. A week later, the students decide whether or not they're going to revise their essay and turn in a fixed version. So basically, do they turn in the same version that got all the comments? So is it like the feedback was totally wasted? Or do they fix something? And what we found is students were twice as likely to fix the essays and turn in revised essays when it was accompanied by that short post-it note, basically conveying wise feedback. So 40% in the control revised compared to 80% in the wise feedback group. And what's amazing about this is, in the control, that means 60% of the time, the feedback that the instructors put on the essays was totally ignored. Students looked at it and they were like, no, I'm good. No, thanks. And how frustrating is that? I mean, for me as a parent, if I correct my kid's behavior and they're like, no, thanks, I'm not interested in this feedback. Like, well, why did I say it? Right. And so our lives are better when we have this kind of willing, independent compliance, right? The goal I was talking about of wise feedback by being clear about what we're doing is causing the students to, of their own free will, choose to look at their mistakes and errors, embrace that feedback, and make corrections. So that's the kind of first example that we're excited about. It's just sometimes we're doing almost everything right. We're giving the right feedback at the right time, but it wasn't clear to people what we were about. And of course, when people are used to the shame and blame, tell and yell approach, which they might have experienced before they got to us, then they will interpret our criticism in light of that prior treatment. Even if we're not intending to be yelling or telling or blaming or shaming, they'll view it that way simply because of what they're used to, unless you are clear and transparent about how this is different. And that's what we think wise feedback is doing. Let me give you a second example. This is a case study of adherence with medication. So these are experiments we did to try to get teenagers to take unpleasant medicine. And the context of this is that half of all cancer patients who are adolescents don't take their oral chemo correctly. And they fully know that cancer could kill them and that chemo kills cancer, but yet they don't take it. Similarly, half of all teenagers who get transplants don't take the anti-rejection meds, and then they lose the kidney or the liver or whatever. So we did a study, not with transplant recipients, because we don't want our control group to like die of losing a kidney, but we had to pick a kind of fake medicine that was similar. It needed to be unpleasant, inconvenient, but plausibly good for you in the future. And so for this experiment, we chose the food supplement Vegemite. You guys ever heard of Vegemite? This is the Australian food. It's basically if you brewed a barrel of beer and then took all the delicious beer out and just left the yeast, and then put that yeast in a jar and then put it on a spoon. Like that's what Vegemite is. They love it in Australia. Americans tend to not like it. Here are videos of real UT undergraduates with a secret camera after they've eaten a spoonful of Vegemite. So you can just see this like disgust kind of response on their faces. And so our like behavior request is after they eat the first spoonful, we give this spoonful that's 3 or 4 times larger, and we ask them if they'll eat the whole thing. Okay. So the question is, under what conditions are people willing to do something that is unpleasant, but plausibly good for themselves or society? Because we tell them it's part of an important study. And what we varied was whether we asked respectfully or disrespectfully. So everyone heard, they saw a video from a doctor, a med student who was like, I'm so-and-so, I'm a second-year medical student, and I'm here too, in a respectful condition, ask whether you might consider taking this medicine. Disrespectful condition, tell you that you should take this medicine. In respectful, you're a UT student. I know you guys are mostly from Texas. This is a compliment at UT, by the way. At other places, it might not. If you're an A&M, maybe not a compliment. But to these students, it was a compliment. You're a UT student, so I figured I would explain the scientific reason why it would be helpful for you to take it. Disrespectful, based on what I know about medicine and disease, the smart thing to do is to take this medicine. So it's disrespectful, emphasizing the speaker's expertise, knowledge, dominance, etc. Respectful and disrespectful both heard. Some people have reported that this medicine is unpleasant to take because of the bitter taste, which of course is like the understatement of the century. And then it says, you might find it helpful to think of that slight discomfort as doing your part to help others in the respectful condition. Disrespectful, try to ignore that, which of course you can't. And then respectful, thank you for considering this request. Disrespectful, thank you in advance for your cooperation. Okay. Now you might look at this and think, hey, the one on the right's a little harsh, but we actually wrote that one with doctors, and they're like, yeah, this is 100% how we talk to patients. Because they have, as I said, this kind of grown-splaining approach. Like, I'm the expert. I know what you should be doing. I have more power in the situation. I'm in charge. You just got to listen to me. And if you did, that would be smart. And if you didn't, that would be dumb. But the problem is that threatens people's autonomy and competence. And therefore, what we found is that people were far more likely to eat the whole second spoonful of Vegemite when they were asked respectfully versus disrespectfully. And that's why, when I talk about persuasion, it's not just what arguments do we make? Like, how are we trying to convince? It's how are we coming across as leaders? And I know you know this, but what this is meant to highlight is the really subtle ways in which we think we're coming across like an authority that they need to listen to, right? It's like, I know what I'm talking about, just listen to me. But that comes across as disrespectful. And as a result, people are less likely to comply. Whereas when people are asked respectfully, then they are far more likely to comply. And so what we think is that this better language leads to a more effective communication cycle. So when you have kind of this transparent, behavioral science informed communication, then people have a different thought. Like a teacher might say, my school leader believes in my potential and is invested in me. Okay, now they might be proactive in changing. They might start following directions. They might start asking for help, continually improving their instruction. Now because they've listened to your excellent feedback and they've done what they should be doing, they start seeing positive results that are really affirming in the classroom. Like maybe I'm a good teacher. Maybe I like this job. And by the way, my school leader helped me do that. And they did it because they believe in me. And now I'm even more likely to listen to my school leader and whatever else is happening on campus. And then over time, you might see teachers that become more effective because they're using more evidence-based practice. They get better student outcomes. They're also less burned out and they might be less likely to quit. So this is our like hypothesis that we need to kind of work on communication. Now I want to show you an example from the workplace before we go to some case studies. It's our last example out of 3. And it's an example of McDonald's. And hopefully you enjoy this. So this is the new research I'm doing. It after I published my book, 10 to 25, I gave a webinar and some guy who owns 40 McDonald's restaurants in West Virginia was on the call, and he's like, "This sounds great. I think I need to apply this, wise feedback, Vegemite stuff to how we talk to our employees on the front line in our restaurants." And I was like, "Well, why is this an issue?" And so he says that the turnover rate at McDonald's is 160%. So just to be clear, for every 100 jobs that you see here, John Ebert, the owner, has to hire 160 people every year to fill those jobs. Okay, so turnover rate is terrible. And not just his stores, nationwide, McDonald's. That costs McDonald's $4 billion a year just to rehire frontline employees nationally, just in the US. Then we did some research for what's the number one cause of turnover, right? Is it people get different jobs or they go to college or whatever? It's like, no, they quit. Quitting is the number one reason. Why do they quit? Number one reason is my boss yelled at me. Okay. Now, a lot of times bosses are correcting behavior. So like a cashier, like on the left, might be rude to a customer. That's usually because a customer screwed up their order. And then when they got it, it was wrong. And then they yell at the cashier, but it was actually the customer's fault. And the cashier's like, "Dude, that's what you ordered." And then they're like, "Just give me my money back." And then there's a whole fight over this whole thing. So that happens a lot. And so it's not clear whose fault it is overall. But at the end of the day, the employee is rude to the customer, and then the manager yells at them, and then the employee quits. Speed is another, during lunch hour, rush hour, it's like, you got to go faster, got to go faster. People are slow, they get yelled at, they feel talked down to, then they quit. Wardrobe and safety, another big one is if you're on the fryer, you can tell I've been thinking a lot about McDonald's, so apologize for all the details if you don't care. But a huge issue is you can't wear jewelry at the fryer. And so what happens is that people show up wearing a bracelet, and then the manager's like, "You can't do that. We're going to get inspection. Your jewelry could fall in the food. That would be a food hazard. It could get caught on something. You're a hazard now. You have to take it off. We're going to be docked on our points by the inspector if you don't." They basically give them a big lecture about it. Okay. And then people say, "Screw this, I'm out of here," and then they quit. Okay. So it's a huge issue. As I was saying, 140, 160% turnover, $4 billion a year. Number one complaint is I was yelled at by my manager. But now let's think about it from the employee's side. Okay. Has anyone here seen the movie Fast Times at Ridgemont High? You seen this movie? So I'm ashamed. I was born 1981, so I was 2 when it came out. I have now seen it. But let me just play a quick clip. Ryan, I'm not 100% confident the audio is going to work. I'll do share computer sound and see if it works. Okay, so it's a short clip. Example of what I was talking about. Oh, wait. Okay.
May I help you?
Yes. This is not the best breakfast I ever ate, and I'd like my money back.
Okay. I believe you have to fill out a form for that.
No, I'd like my money back now.
I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. You see, I have to fill out a form and, well, you ate most of it already, so...
You see that sign? It says 100% guaranteed. You know what the meaning of guarantee is? Did they teach you that here?
Sir, if you just wait a minute...
Look, just put your little hand back in the cash register and give me my $2.75 back, please, Brad.
Sir, if you just give me a minute, I'll find the forms. I'll take care of everything.
I don't have a minute. You've made me late enough. I am so tired of dealing with incompetence. It says 100% guaranteed, you moron.
Mister, if you don't shut up, I'm gonna kick 100% of your ass!
Is there a problem here? Can I help you, sir?
You bet you have a problem. Your employee here used profanity and threatened me with violence. I'm surprised. I eat here all the time and usually have good service until today. All I wanted was my money back on this breakfast. It was a little undercooked. And he threatens me with violence. Now I'm gonna call your supervisor.
I can take care of it. Mr. Hamilton, did you threaten this customer or use profanity in any way?
Why? He insulted me first. He called me a moron, Dennis.
Answer me. Did you threaten this customer or use profanity in any way?
Yes.
You're fired. I'm very sorry, sir. I'll refund your money right now. Hope you won't hold this against us. You know how these young kids are these days. Here we are.
All right. This is Judge Reinhold's days before he was Eddie Murphy's sidekick in Beverly Hills Cop. But hopefully you notice a few things about this. You know, many of us watch this and see the sense of injustice, right? But this kind of thing happens all the time where frontline employees are blamed for something that is a response to somebody else and the manager doesn't have their back. And then they get yelled at or fired. And so if they don't get fired, then they quit. Okay. And so what we thought is that this is some low-hanging fruit. We can like just change managers' communication styles and then handle these kinds of situations in a better way. And in doing so, create a better workplace for young employees, but also make managers' lives easier because they're getting the kind of willing, independent compliance that they always wanted. So I don't know how to go forward here. Hold on. Okay. So we asked a bunch of managers how they typically respond, and they said things like this. They weren't as bad as the one in the video, but they said things like this. I just saw your interaction with the customer. It looks like there might have been some confusion. I get that the situation was frustrating, but let's keep in mind there are few ways it could have gone wrong. Maybe the customer said the wrong thing. Maybe the order was entered differently, or it could have been made incorrectly in the kitchen. It's not really about pointing fingers or defending ourselves. What matters most is making it right for the guest and finding a way to say yes. Okay. And these are lifetime McDonald's managers. They're like, yes, awesome response. We share this with lots of frontline employees, and they're like, this is a terrible response. So why is that? What the manager's been trying to do here is trying to like acknowledge negative feelings, say it could be anybody's fault, don't take it personally, and then they're just trying to get to the outcome. But they don't deal with the deeper sense of injustice and the emotions of this kind of event, right? And they also don't frame it in terms of growth, right? It comes across as very judgmental and evaluative, like you screwed up and you're wrong and you just need to do what I say. So it's very much a like suppress emotions type approach. And they're only just waving their hands at acknowledging the negative feelings. They're not really doing anything authentic. And so what we did is we started analyzing specific things that people tend to say and why they come across in the wrong way. This gets to the social psychology of the matter. The manager says, I get that the situation was frustrating. The manager thinks, oh, I'm acknowledging feelings. What the employee hears is, you need to put up with that frustration and do what I say. Right? And so then that's a problem because the manager thinks they're being compassionate, while the employee thinks they're being uncaring. So there's a total miscommunication there. Next, when the manager says, there are a few ways it could have gone wrong. In their mind, they're thinking, oh, I'm not blaming. But what the employee hears is, you probably screwed up, you messed up the order, and you don't even realize it. That's how incompetent you are. And so then the employee feels accused and unsupported and maybe a little insulted. And then when the manager says, what matters most is making it right for the guest, there what the employee hears is, your perspective doesn't matter, and you need to make the customer happy no matter what. And I don't care how you do it or what barriers you're facing, you just need to do it. Then the employee feels pressured to do something, but they also feel pressured to project their sense of reality and justice in the world, right? Did you, like, think back to Brad and how confused he was. He's like, well, yeah, I did say that, but there was a context to it, and it's like the manager was forcing him to conform to the worldview of the customer. And that feels like it's a bridge too far for a lot of people. So what we did is we took a mix of the best answers and then we edited them. Also, by the way, ChatGPT on its own is pretty terrible at this task. So I don't need to go into that, but it's pretty bad. And the reason why, of course, is that it's trained on language that's on Reddit and advice columns and stuff like that. And in general, people are bad at resolving this kind of scenario. So since the training data is bad, then the output of the model is bad as well. At any rate, what we did is we did a psychological analysis and we're like, what should the priorities be? One is check in on the crew member's emotional state. Like, are you okay? First, the most important thing to do. That shows care and concern, builds trust. Next, clearly state that the company or store priorities are important, but they need to be like the organizational priorities, not my personal preference as your manager. Because if it's my personal preferences, it comes across like I'm being arbitrary and picking on you. And so by stating the company priorities, you're mitigating concern about bias. Next is to offer legitimate reasons for the person's response to show you're not blaming them. And then to feel less judgmental, articulate a belief that they can grow and improve. So it offers hope for a better future and it shows my investment in them. And last is offering yourself as a collaborative resource to help them improve, and which shows that they're not on their own, which again also confirms that they're not being relegated to the role of someone who's unimportant and you're trying to get rid of them. So let's see what this looks like. You're gonna have to zoom in. Apologize for the tiny font. So Carol Dweck and Carol wrote Book Mindset. We personally edited this. And we had a lot to say. So I'll read it to you, but I color coded the points that matched from the previous slide. So here's our answer. Can we talk over here for a minute? I just saw an interaction between you and a customer, and there seemed to be some sort of misunderstanding, and it looks stressful. First, are you okay? And then it says, wait for response. We've learned you have to add wait for response to people because they want to just keep talking. Okay, now can you tell me your perspective on what happened? Wait for response again. Thanks for sharing that. I can understand your frustration. As you know, as a company, we always want to get a customer to yes, that they're invoking the standard of the organization. That means we need to find a way to make it right for them, even in tough situations. I know it's hard to do in this situation because it feels like the customer was being unfair to you and blaming you. Okay. So there it's giving legitimate reason for their emotions. Now, I'm going to say something that might sound surprising, but here it is. As a restaurant, we don't actually care who was right or wrong. Yes, of course, if our employees make mistakes, we want them to fix them. But our two main priorities are, first, that the customer is satisfied, and second, that you are okay and feel supported. So we don't have to think about who's to blame for the order. It doesn't matter to me. And in fact, no mistake you make could make me any less committed to you because I see you as essential to the success of the restaurant. Therefore, I don't want you to feel like you need to defend yourself. In fact, I'm already on your side. Instead, in difficult moments like this, the restaurant needs you to demonstrate the professional skill of getting customers who are upset to a yes, even if they are being unfair. I acknowledge that's not easy. In fact, I know from experience that it's a skill that takes time to build. I didn't always know how to not get defensive and how to instead focus on making it right. But I'm asking you to get better at this, not only so the restaurant can be successful, but also because this is a professional skill that will benefit you in this job and any job you might have in the future. Don't forget that I'm dedicated to helping you continue to develop this skill because I'm invested in your success now and later. Of course, sometimes customers are too much to handle, and that's fine. You can always get a manager or ask me to step in. If we keep working together, we can strike a good balance. You'll have the confidence to handle these conflicts with customers, but you'll also know that we have your back and can step in if needed. All right, so again, that's a lot, but it's got these key themes, and you can totally see how this would apply if I'm an administrator talking to an educator who maybe had a rough conversation with a kid or with a parent, right? which instead of blaming and shaming or acknowledging that it's difficult, saying, here's the standard, checking in on people, explaining, you know, what they can do different and how it can improve, and then offering ourselves as a resource going forward. Um, just for fun, just to tell you with this, we then did a bunch of these scenarios. We had a bunch of McDonald's managers write their answers, and then Carol Dweck and I edited those, and then we trained an AI agent to give basically a kind of robot Yeager in your pocket. And actually, its answer is pretty good. It ended up being shorter. It said, I noticed the interaction with the customer earlier seemed tense. Are you okay? Wait for a response. Thanks for sharing. I get that it can be frustrating when a customer is upset, especially if it feels like they're blaming you. Here's the thing. Our main goal is to make sure the customer leaves happy, even if it means going the extra mile. It's not about who's right or wrong. It's about finding a way to make it right for them. This is important because it keeps our service top notch and helps you develop skills that are valuable in any job. Handling tough situations with customers is a skill that takes time to build, and I'm here to help you with that. What do you think might help you feel more prepared to handle these situations? Wait for a response. I'm committed to supporting you in developing this skill. And remember, you can always ask for help if a customer is too much to handle. We're in this together, and I believe you can get better at this with practice. So this is fully written by a robot in seconds. And so right now we have hundreds of McDonald's managers every day asking this app, what should I say? You know, if someone comes to the thing where they got the bracelet and they don't take their bracelet off. And then the app will say things like, ask them why they're wearing the bracelet. And then almost always people say, oh, I'm honoring my dead relative. And, you know, they were killed in a drive-by and I'm wearing it, you know, to honor them. And then the app will be like, ask them if they can wear it on their ankle. And then they'll say yes. So you don't end up with this confrontation that ends in quitting. You instead work with people and find solutions. Okay, where I'm going to end is just back at some of these scenarios, and then Ryan, you can take over. You know, young new teachers critique during and after a classroom observation. What we tend to say is stuff like, here are the things you need to work on. I expect to see these changes going forward. But that's interpreted as, my school only checked in on me because they think I'm ineffective and at risk of being the worst teacher. And so, you know, if you, as an exercise, think about what would you say instead to promote the most charitable interpretation. Another dilemma, critiquing a teacher for professionalism. What we tend to say is, we expect you to show up looking professional. You need to manage your social media profile so it's more professional, etc. How it's interpreted is, my school leader thinks I'm immature and not ready for real responsibility, that I can't be trusted. They don't believe in me. Okay, so what's an alternative way to communicate? Last, enthusiastic teacher is hosting a parent open house, planning their first parent communication. What we tend to say is something like, here's how we need you to talk to parents. Make sure you say X and Y. Definitely don't say A or B. But that's interpreted as, my school leader assumes I'm going to screw up and put my foot in my mouth because they think so poorly of me, right? So how do we promote a more charitable interpretation? So these are kind of dilemmas. We can be in an ongoing conversation. I'm looking forward to your comments and thoughts. But Ryan, I'm going to turn it over to you to see how you want to move forward. But thank you all so much for listening, and I hope this was useful.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Dr. Yeager. And I would just say to everybody on the call, like, if you take this, and I'll be sharing all this, you know, with you, take this, talk with your teams about it. And if you want to share that last column, you know, responses that, you know, you guys have worked together to think about, and you want some feedback on those, and we'll definitely, as David mentioned, continue that conversation to support, you know, along the way. And these all really connect with what your teachers are learning, you know, in Fuse as well. You know, we frame that in a classroom setting, you know, but it's all about, you know, how our language as adults is being interpreted by adolescents, and making sure that it aligns with the way that we want it to be communicated with.
Yeah, and hopefully that last slide is a good activity you can do almost as a workshop with your teams. But those are the kinds of activities we do with our Fuse teachers, where we're like, you might say this to your students, they're going to interpret it this way. What do you say instead? So we give them that A, not B kind of contrast.
All right, well, thank you, David, for joining us. And David will be back for the next session, and I'll talk a little bit about our second leadership series here before we finish. But I think we've got, it's about 2:52. I've got a few slides to go over that are about some kind of nuts and bolts about Fuse. If you currently have teachers in the program, great to stay on. If you're joining us and you don't have teachers in yet, feel free to stay as well. But might not be as relevant to you. If you got to leave early, because I know we might go a little over 3 o'clock, all this will be recorded and sent to you. But really wanted to just take some time, go through some nuts and bolts of what your teachers will be doing in the next couple months as part of the fellowship. One piece that I think most know, but just wanted to highlight is teachers in the program. It's a 2-year full fellowship, and they're in actually 2 groups each year. So we've got a blue group and a gold group of teachers. And because we have 10 practices within the fellowship that they complete over those 2 years, we don't want to cram all those into 1 year. One thing we definitely value in our fellowship is that it's we take our time, with implementing these different ideas around communication and around different cognitive science practices. And to try to do all that in 1 year would be too much. So we space it out. But I wanted to share which practices your teachers are learning that first year here in the summer. So those of you who have teachers in their first year and they're in the blue group, and you can ask them and when you talk to them, which group they're in. So our first year blue teachers and our second year gold teachers, because they flipped the second year, they've spent the summer doing couple different practices. And for some reason, 2 of them are not on each one, but I'll tell you what they are. So if they're in the blue group that first year, they're doing a practice called reframing mistakes. So it's all about, actually, I think there's only 2 here because I went 1 slide too much. There we go. So here's the summer practices that they're participating in. So the blue group is reframing mistakes, really talking about how our messages of how we talk about mistakes are interpreted the way we want them to be in a classroom to highlight and see those as the value. They spend some time talking about how they communicate their retesting and revision policies. We don't promote a certain policy. Everybody's got their own practices and policies for your districts, but we talk with them about how you communicate it and if it aligns with your the way that you communicate about mistakes and to make sure everything is connected and not seen as potentially hypocritical by adolescents. Then they also develop a culture of learning speech. So that's something you might see near the start of the school year. It's really a way for them to be transparent with their students about this is how I view whatever content it is that they're teaching and where they want to be, like I said, very transparent about their own philosophy and their own ideas about teaching and learning in their class. They still talk about their the nuts and bolts of the syllabus, things like that, but this is the way that we work with them to do it maybe in a more engaging way that helps the students understand some of that wise feedback idea, that there's going to be high standards in this class, but the support that you're going to feel along the way is going to match that level of high standard. And if you're in teachers in the first year in the gold group, the 3 they do over the summer are around the science of memory. So taking a deep dive into how we can make it less likely that students are making the same mistakes in April that they were making in October, and why certain techniques make it less likely that they'll make those same mistakes. Different engaging retrieval practices, they take a deep dive and a better understanding around cognitive science and why these certain practices that we recommend help students recall information. And then also how they can start using more predictive language in their like tier 1 instruction time or their direct teach. So keeping that brain engaged on the adolescent side by using predictive language as the adult in the room. So those are the 2 year 1. If you have year 2 teachers, it's just flipped. Whichever ones they did last year, they do the other group in that second year. And you've got some teachers in your districts that are still finishing these up. Some are already done. Everybody kind of has a different calendar of when your school year starts. So these are they're in the process of working on these as we speak. And then in the fall, when we do our fall institute, they will move on to their next 2. So they do 5 each year. We do more of a workshop in the spring. But in the fall, the blue group will be doing mining for mistakes. So it's very much a questioning strategy to keep students engaged, a lot of times in a one-on-one setting or a small group setting. And then exam speeches, where we work with them to take a really deep dive to think about how they talk about tests, like how they frame language when they first say a test is coming up, how they talk to students the day of that exam, and how they talk to students when they get the grades back, to keep them with an understanding that a grade doesn't define who you are as a person, and that maybe a grade that you didn't expect or hope to receive on that exam doesn't mean that I'm disappointed in you or I thought you didn't care enough to get the grade that you wanted. And then with the gold group, we take a deeper dive into space practice and optimizing memory encoding. So continuing to look at different techniques that a lot of teachers do already, like spiraling content, interleaving, space practice versus chunking, but thinking through like how do we communicate to that students? Like how do we tell them why we spiral content so they don't think that my teacher already taught me this and she's doing it again because she thinks I didn't pay attention last time. So really thinking about how we communicate what we're doing in class. So just wanted to give you just the highlights of them. You can definitely talk to your teachers, ask them like how this practice go, things like that. And then I think Catherine, maybe you can put in the link the page on our site that has just quick snippets of each one. That's that fellowship details page where you get just a little look at each of the practices as well. A couple other things we put together just for you. So when you are doing a classroom walkthrough or things like that, maybe just some noticings, some wonderings that you might have to kind of help facilitate those conversations. So if you're doing a walkthrough in a Fuse teacher's classroom and they're in the blue group, think about how they're talking about mistakes. And if you notice anything maybe differently than you've seen in the past, how are they talking about those retesting and revision practices? Gold group, how do lessons activities help students revisit and connect ideas they've learned over time? Think through if they're, talking about using language like we just need to get through this or we've got so much to cover. We talk a lot about that, the impact of statements like that on students who might need help or might need are hesitant about raising their hand and asking for help. If they feel like, oh, my teacher said we've got so much to cover, we need to get through this today, then they're going to be less likely to do that. Some wonderings, maybe some questions. Of course, you can ask whatever questions you like, but these are just some ideas that we came up with. We always talk about, using questions with uptake, so open-ended questions, essentially. Can you tell me more about this? How you're talking about how you're framing your grading and revision strategies, how you share your classroom culture so students feel safe to make mistakes, and ask questions. What kinds of strategies do you find helpful for helping students remember things better and for longer? Things like that. So one piece that I didn't add to the slide deck that I just want you to know, we're going to be sending the district designee a shared spreadsheet that has all your teacher names on it, and it'll have which group they're in. And then we'll also use that to kind of track attendance with you throughout the year. But that'll be a way for you to see which teachers are in which group. But definitely just ask them, that they know which group they're in. Some few things that they'll be doing over the first part of the fall semester. Just wanted to make sure they were on your radar as well in case they mention it or you might notice it. So they all do their first student engagement module. So the students in each of the Fuse teachers' classrooms also do basically a mix of a learning on their part about how their a lot of cognitive science and how their brain works and how they can better understand stress they might feel about a certain class that they're in. And then it also is an opportunity for the teachers to get feedback from their students. So the questions that are embedded within that module align with what the teachers are learning within Fuse. So then the teachers will get 3 reports throughout the year where they can see if the adjustments they're making in their class, their students are noticing and feeling that. We asked them all to do that in the first 10 days of school. I know some districts, the students don't get like Chromebooks until like 2 weeks in, so it's 10 days after that. We try to keep it, somewhat of a window for everybody, but we're very flexible. We just want as many students to be able to engage with it as possible. So you might be hearing something about the modules from your teachers. Next thing they'll be doing also are the virtual coaching sessions. So they do 4 of these throughout the year. They happen outside the workday. We give them 4 different options to join each of the weeks when we hold them. So for example, the year 1 teachers, they're just starting Fuse this year. Their first virtual coaching sessions will be either September 15th or 17th. And we give them the option to either join at 7 a.m. Central, everything Central Time, 7 a.m. Central Time or 5:30 p.m. Central Time on either that Monday or Wednesday. They sign themselves up. They shouldn't need any kind of classroom coverage or anything like that. The ones in the morning, I know some classes start around 7:45, so we do our best to have them done and ready to go to welcome their students. Year 2 fellows, their first round will be that September 22nd, 24th. Same thing. Everything's virtual. They log in, they get some feedback from our facilitators, get a chance to talk with one another about the different practices that they're engaging with. The next event where they will be out of class for a day. So we do 2 full day institutes throughout the school year. One is in October and one is in February. The October one, here's the dates for those. So if you have year 1 teachers, the ones in that blue group, that's going to be October 22nd. The gold group's the 29th. Year 2, there's the dates for those. Those are the only days in the fall that they would need classroom coverage if they're like a teacher, a full teacher of record in the program. And one thing I want to mention about this too is they need to join on their own device. We use a platform called Engagely, which we different table groups and things like that to make it an engaging session with them. So they do need to, it's not the kind of institute where everybody could, meet in a conference room and join on one machine. They really need to be on their own device for those. So if they don't have a quiet place to do that on campus or in a district session, they just need someplace quiet. So some districts allow them to work remotely those days. Some do not. Totally your call. They just need a quiet place to join on their own machine. And those days they learn in the fall, they'll learn the next two library practice elements, do activities and group work with our facilitators as well. And Dr. Yeager comes back for each of those to give them additional direct talks about the science behind what they're learning. Last couple things, and then I'll hang around if anybody has any questions. We can chat one-on-one. I'll stick around for a little bit, but I think all of you have probably gotten an invite from me already. I sent it directly to you, so hopefully it showed up on your calendar. But our next session for the leadership series is going to be with Stephanie Okamoto. Catherine, you put her bio in the chat as well. But Stephanie Okamoto and David have worked very closely together on a lot of the research around some of these management practices, and she kind of came up in the management world with Microsoft, became one of their leaders in the HR department and around building culture. And she was there during some of those points in Microsoft where it was very much a top-down command control type of environment, and helped shift that with a new CEO coming in and really building a much stronger collaborative, inclusive culture with Microsoft. She's now with ServiceNow, doing a lot of those same ideas. So I think if you join us for this one, you're going to get a lot of great ideas, content around similar to what David talked about today in different contexts and different settings. To really, so I spent most of my career with Round Rock ISD in various campus and central office roles, and a lot of what your Fuse teachers are learning, I think, are very applicable too when we're leading front office staffs, even departments, at central office, and really thinking through how we can also craft our language to better engage with our teams. My last ask, just if you haven't already, feel free to sign up for our newsletter. We send out about once or twice a month, just updates of different things going on with our institute and our team. And it's a great way to keep connected with Fuse. Feel free to share that with anybody else. And then we've just started a LinkedIn page as well. We don't have too much on there yet, but like this video and others will be loaded up there as well. So do hope that you might consider either subscribing for the newsletter or joining our LinkedIn page. All right, well, that's what we have for our first leadership series event. If you have folks on your teams that maybe didn't get that invite, you can either email me their contact and I'll add them to the next one. You're also more than welcome. I think you have the ability to add people to that invite as well. So you can add if there's other department directors or assistant principals, anybody like that you'd like to be included in these sessions. And if anything resonated with you today and you'd like to talk through how might we do, aside from your teachers and Fuse, any kind of work together around supporting other elements in your districts, love to talk more about that as well. We do those things as well. But that's all I've got. I'm going to turn off the recording, but I'm going to stay here and see if anybody has any questions. Other than that, everybody have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you for joining us.
I actually did have a question real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, you mentioned that you were going to be sending out to our district administrator the list of like what teachers are in which group, like Blue 1 and Gold Year 2 and stuff like that. Um, that's going to be forthcoming, right? You guys are going to send that out because I'm trying to keep track of everything.
Yeah, we haven't finished. We still haven't teachers join, so we
Okay.
haven't finalized all those yet. But yeah, I'll try to get those out by the end of the week. If you want it sooner, if you don't mind just shooting me an email and I'll send yours right back to you.
Sure, I'll
Um,
do that.
yeah, just do that. I think you should have an email from me. I would imagine.
Probably, yeah. Okay,
Or
thank
I
you,
can
sir.
just yeah. Thank you. Thanks for being here. I don't know if anybody else is still here or not, but I think I'm going to end the meeting. If anybody is listening and has any questions about anything at all, I put my email if you don't have it in the chat. Feel free to send me anything, and I'll either email you back, or we can hop on a quick call, talk through anything that's on your mind about Fuse. All right. Thank you, everybody.